Hi! In this project we're gonna be making this talking pumpkin character that can talk to your voice. I'm gonna be coding the animation part, and Frank will add the microphone into the mix. In this video I'll teach how to make the animated character. Let's begin. We'll start with basic HTML. And this is gonna be a Canvas app. So I'm gonna set here a canvas with ID my canvas. And I'm just going to write some script here. Usually you want to do this in an external file, but we will have an external file for our pumpkin character. And here we're just gonna execute that code, so it can be as a test. Function main, which we call when the body loads. And let's just see if this works. I'll refresh and you can see in the console that main was called. Let's remove this now. And if we look in the elements, we will see that our canvas is quite small. And because this is a Canvas app, we wanted to cover the entire screen. We also see the body having a small margin there. So I'm going to be adding these styling elements here. Removing the margin for the body. Now this is done. There's no more margin, but the canvas needs to be stretched to fill the entire screen. So we say my canvas width equals window inner width, and same for the height. Now the canvas stretches the entire screen. So let's draw our pumpkin. Even though the code is not there yet, we want to have an idea how the structure will look like. We're gonna initialize the pumpkin like this. Pumpkin equals new pumpkin, so a new instance of the pumpkin class. And let's specify here the location where we want the pumpkin to be drawn and its size. So I'm gonna say for the X, the center of our canvas, so my canvas dot width divided by 2. For the Y, my canvas dot height divided by 2. And for the size, I actually want to input this as a radius. Our pumpkin is going to be centered in the center of this X and Y location, and then it will have a radius because the pumpkin looks pretty much like a circle, so it makes sense. So let's say the radius is going to be defined with respect to the minimum between the width and the height, and say math.minimum my canvas width, my canvas height. We are going to scale this by at most half, because otherwise the object is going to be twice the size of the canvas if this is the radius. So let's leave it like this and call a draw method that we'll need to implement on this canvas context. So let's say my canvas get context 2D. And now we need to go to our pumpkin class and create it. So I'm going to start the class like this, and the constructor is going to have these 3 elements, the X, the Y, and the radius. And I'm just going to store them inside the class attributes. And implement the draw method, which given a canvas context, it's going to be drawing there. So let's try drawing a circle for now. Let's make it gray. Begin path. So our circle will start at this dot x and this dot y with the radius of this dot rad starting at 0 radians and ending at math.pi times 2 radians, so a full circle, and fill. Now if I'm going to refresh the page, I get an error. And it says pumpkin is not defined because I forgot to include this script. So here on the top of our HTML file, I'm going to write script source equal to pumpkin. A refresh and source. Yeah. So now we have our circle there, but it's a bit too big. It fits the canvas perfectly. Let's give it a little bit of spacing here and turn this into 40%. So now this is looking good. Let's go back to our pumpkin and see how to make this look like an actual pumpkin. But before that, I'm gonna change this arc into a rectangle so that we define the region where we're gonna be drawing. So let's say rectangle from this dot x minus this dot radius, this dot y minus this dot radius. So this is the top left corner of the rectangle. It's a square really, because we're going to be passing here the radius times 2 and the radius times 2 for the width and height. Now refreshing this is going to give us this square region where we're going to be drawing our pumpkin. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is actually relying on translation and scaling methods from the canvas context, because you can see this line of code is quite difficult to read, and the code is going to be filled with a bunch of these if we don't do something about it. So we can actually get the same result if we say here context translate to this dot x, this dot y in the beginning. So what essentially this means is that we are going to be moving inside the middle of the canvas, because that's what x and y were coming from the main file. And then we are going to scale this by this dot rad and this dot rad. So in the x and y direction, we're going to scale this to the radius, which means that here we can just work with percent values like -1 or -100%, -100%, and then 200% because the radius is going to be on both sides. And refreshing this is going to give us exactly the same thing. But now we are working inside this region with the top left corner of -1, -1, and bottom right corner of +1, +1. So all our drawing methods are going to be much simpler to write like this. But because we're transforming the context here, we really want to save the status before and restore after we are done with the drawing. Otherwise, this will impact the next drawings in a weird way. So this is very important to remember. So actually, I'm going to put up here the scaling, translation, and the saving of the context, and then restore here at the end. This will not change anything. So now we're going to start to draw our pumpkin. And we begin with drawing the head inside this region, and it will be made of a series of ellipses. So I'm going to keep this gray rectangle, gray square for reference, and I'm going to be drawing the ellipses inside it. So let's begin. It will be orange ellipse, so I'm going to give it a color of, let's say, RGB, maximum red, some amount of green, and no blue. And now we are going to begin path, and draw an ellipse. This is a relatively new function in the HTML Canvas API, and it needs an X and a Y. And we can just put this one in the middle, so 0, 0, because of the scaling we did previously. Then a radius of X, let's make it, for example, 0.3. A radius of Y, and let's make it full, so it will be stretched the whole vertical size of this square. Then rotation, we are not going to bother with that for now. And then start angle, end angle, this is same as in the arc method we saw previously. So let's say 0 and math.pi multiplied by 2. And we need to fill this ellipse. Let's refresh. And we see the ellipse there. Our pumpkin the head is going to be made out of several of these. I'm just going to copy this code, give it a little bit different color hue. So let's reduce the amount of green a little bit, make it more reddish. And now we're going to draw this ellipse a little bit towards the left. So let's modify here the X by minus 0.3, let's say, and see how this looks like. Okay. I think I want these to be a little bit wider, maybe 0.4 here for the X radius of these ellipses. I think this looks a bit nicer. And let's mirror this one also on the right. I'm going to copy this code here and put a plus 0.3 here, because this is going to be on the positive side of the x-axis. So we have this now. And let's copy this code once more and change here the value once again. Maybe we make it 140, so even more red, giving it a different tint. And move it more to the left, maybe like this. Yeah, I think that's a bit too red for my taste. I'm gonna make this a bit more yellow, like that. So this is now basically how the pumpkin is going to be drawn, but I want to add a little bit finishing touches to the shape of this head. So I want to add a stem at the top, and that's going to be a small rectangle. Let's make it green. Begin path. So it's going to be really small. I'm going to start at minus 0.05, for example, and then minus 1. So now I'm at the top center of the square, just a little bit to the left. And I'm going to give it a radius of 0.1. And not the radius, but width and height of 0.1 and 0.1. So if we do this and say context.fill, then we don't really see it. It's being now covered here by this ellipse at the top. So I'm going to be moving these ellipses a little bit down and reducing the radii a little bit, just to shape this a little bit nicer and still keep this square aspect ratio. So let me go to the first ellipse that we drew, and instead of having here 1, let's first move it a bit down. So let's say 0.03 on the vertical. Okay, and now let's reduce this radius slightly, so 0.97, I think. Yeah, now this fits perfectly here, and you can see the stem a little bit at the top. And now we need to modify the other things in a similar way. I'm going to copy this 0.03 offset from the top and just add it to all of these elements here. But for the radius, I'm actually gonna make it a bit smaller with each of these distance from the center. So I'm going to say 0.95 maybe for these, and 0.93. Maybe this one can be 92. I want the slices at the sides to be even smaller than the ones next to the center part. I think this looks okay. So now we have our head, and the code is already starting to be quite messy. If you look here, we just drew the shape of the head, and we still have to do the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and then the animations. This is going to be a mess if we don't do something about it. So what I'm going to do is essentially remove all this code from here. I will cut it so it's in my clipboard now, and make a method here called draw head on the given context. So this method is what I'm going to implement down here, draw head. And because I use this symbol here, it means that this method is private. You can't call it from outside, but the object can call it within itself. So I'm pasting all this code here, and now the initial draw method is quite clear. It has this testing code here that we actually don't need anymore for drawing the bounding box because we already have the shape of our head there. So I'm going to remove it. And all it does, it translates to the wherever it needs to draw the pumpkin with a given radius, and then draws the head, restoring the context after this transformation was done. So much clearer to read this method here. And if we refresh, the code still works minus the rectangle region, which is now gone. So let's continue now to draw the eyes. I'm going to make a new placeholder function here, draw eyes on the context. So I'm going to be doing a very similar thing down here. And what I want to do now is draw my first eye somewhere around here, which relative to the center is about minus 0.4, minus 0.4. So I'm going to begin this by translating there. So because we translate, we want to save first, then translate minus 0.4, minus 0.4. And then at the end, we need to remember to restore. And at this location, I'm just going to draw a small triangle. So fill style black. We want these to be black. And I'm going to begin path and then move to a little bit to the left, say minus 0.1, and no movement on the vertical. And then line 2, and now we move to the right, so 0.1 here, and also moving on the vertical upwards, so minus 0.1, and line 2, 0.1 and plus 0.1 here. Then we can close the path and fill. So what we are doing now is not what I expected. I have a mistake here. This should not be a column. This should not be a comma. This should be a stop point. Okay. It looks okay, but I think we can make it a little bit bigger. So let's modify this to 1.5. This is really personal preference. I'm happy with this. So we want two eyes here. I'm going to essentially copy all of this code down here, and this one is going to be symmetrical over to the right. So I'm going to put here plus 0.4, and all these x coordinates, they're going to flip their sign like this. And I'm going to refresh, and we have the eyes done. Let's draw the nose next. So I'm going to actually I'm going to actually copy this draw eyes method from here and rename it as draw nose, because I want the nose to look kind of like the eyes, but smaller and in the center. You can go with different variations for the nose, but I think this is nice looking. So what I'm gonna do here is essentially translate a little bit this time and make these far less big. So I'm going to reduce the size of these triangles, and let me just save, refresh. All right, that one looks good. Let's do the same on the right. Now you don't see the right nostril because it overlaps the right eye. It's exactly the same size. So I'm just going to make that one a little bit lower and smaller in size as well. This is pretty good, but maybe I want this them to be closer to each other. Maybe 0.8 here. I mean 0.08 here and minus 0.08 here. This is pretty good, I think. And finally, we're going to draw the mouth. So our function looks quite similar to the other ones. We are going to translate now downwards. So ctx save, translate. Nothing on the x-axis, but let's say 0.3 on the y-axis. And then remember to restore. So here, let's begin by drawing a rhombus shape and see where we go with that. So I'm going to move to maybe minus 0.6 and 0 on the y-axis, and then line to 0 on the x, and then minus a small value on the top, let's say minus 0.2. Then line 2 on the right, we want it to be symmetrical, so 0.6 and 0. And line 2 at the bottom, plus 0.2 here. And close path. And fill. We forgot to set the fill style to black here. It might work anyway because we are drawing the other things as black, but it's good practice to always set it so you don't have any surprises there. Okay, and this is where the mouth is gonna be, but it will look a little bit different. I actually want it to be a bit lower, maybe 0.4 here. Okay. But now the nose is too high, so let's go a little bit to the nose and say here, let's not translate it on the vertical axis. Let's just put 0 here. Okay, that's much better. So let's continue shaping the mouth. I want to have another point up somewhere here and then another point down somewhere here. So a little bit of zigzaggy pattern. So I'm going to go here and say context line to minus 0.4 and minus 0.2. So that's 1 point, and then line to minus 0.2 and 0. So let's refresh, and yeah, it's good, but this point here should be a little bit lower, and this point here should be a little bit higher to my taste. So let's lower this point here first and say 1.8 maybe, and then this one 0.08 maybe. No, minus. Yeah, almost there. Maybe 17 here. Okay, I like this. So now I'm gonna do this same thing on the right top part. All I need to do here is change these minus into plus. Great. And now the same thing is gonna happen at the bottom. So reverse order, I'm going to do this and then this. Then I have this midpoint here already, so I will continue with these and these. And this negative needs to be changed into positive everywhere here. I'm just going to remove this plus because plus is implied. Right, so we have the mouth and eyes and nose and everything looking the way we want it. Next thing we want to do is the animation. So let's go back to our main file and prepare the animation somehow. I'm going to put here an interval, set interval with a callback function that is going to run every, let's put it 10 times a second, so every 100 milliseconds. And inside here, we want to draw our pumpkin, but giving it an amount for how much we want the mouth to open. So let's call this value openness. And in the beginning, let's have it closed. So set it to 0 and pass it here as a second argument to our draw method. We will need to implement this next. And then let's make this openness increase by a small value. So it will have values between 0 and 1 or 0 to 100%. And 100% is like the maximum openness that we support. So if the openness is greater than 1, let's reset it to 0. So the mouth is going to go like something like that. All right, so this should work. But of course, we need to implement this inside our pumpkin class. So let's set here the openness argument, and we need to pass this down to the mouth and here to the draw mouth method. And inside this, it will be a huge pain to modify all of these coordinates here to take this openness into account. And that's why I really recommend using here the scale method from the Canvas context. So we're not going to scale horizontally, but only vertically. So horizontally, we leave it at 100%. And vertically, we're going to have here the value of openness. And that's it. This is now going to modify everything so that the drawing will be as we expected. I'm going to refresh. And you see now the mouth disappears for a brief second. And that's because when we pass here 0 openness, it's essentially non-existing. So we want to have a little bit of extra here in the beginning. And now if I refresh, the mouth is always visible, a little bit open in the beginning. So this looks okay-ish. But if you really want to make a good animation, you need to consider many details. And one is that when you open your mouth, this point here actually gets closer to the center. Like, so basically you want to preserve the same surface area for this black region that your mouth has here, or at least try to do that. So I'm gonna actually minus here the openness, refresh, and this is very extreme. We want just a little bit of this effect, so let's say multiplied by 0.2. Now it's much better. It basically feels more organic somehow. And I don't like the way this animation looks. I'm gonna do something a bit more clever here. Just a sec. And I'm not gonna explain what I do here. You are gonna have to figure it out and hopefully tell me in the comments. So I'm gonna be doing a little bit of math instead. Yeah, I think this is gonna look just nice. I don't need this here anymore. So a little bit clever math here, and let's now pass this value to the pumpkin like this. And the animation is a little bit different. So your job to tell me what I did just here. And maybe I'm going to make it a little bit faster. Well, this is not the right way to do it. Okay, so this is now nicer to work with. So next thing I want you to pay attention when you watch somebody's face or when you look at an animation is that when the mouth opens, something needs to happen to the eyes as well. The eyes become quite small because the cheeks are pushing on the bottom of the eyes. And we're gonna do the same thing with our pumpkin next. We are going to pass this openness to the eyes as well. So let me just do that here and go back down to our draw eyes method. And same trick here, scale. Now horizontally we don't want any change. I'm gonna set this to 1, but vertically we want this to be opposite the value of the openness. So something like this. Let's refresh. But we don't want the eye to disappear again. So let's just put here 1.2. Yeah, this looks okay, but the same idea as for the mouth applies here as well. When the eye closes, you want it to actually stretch a little bit. It does look better. It looks more organic in that way. So I'm going to put here plus openness and a little bit of it. So I'm not going to make it extremely wide, maybe a little bit wider. So if I put my mouse now here, you can see it stretching and squishing from my mouse location. This looks quite good, I think. Let's apply this to the other eye as well, like this. And now you see when the pumpkin is opening his mouth, both eyes get more shut. And we can do something for the nose as well. When the mouth is opening, maybe we move the nose a little bit upwards. So let's move this, let's add this openness to the nose as well. Like this. And here we don't need to scale anything. We just need to move it a little bit upwards. So the more open the mouth is, the more up we want this. We're gonna say well, this is 0, so we just say openness. And if I leave it like this, it's gonna go outside the screen. So let's just put here multiplied by something small like this. Oh, it's going down, so y-axis goes that way. I mean, y-axis goes from the top left corner of the screen downwards on the computer, so this needs to be negative value here. And I think this is too big. Let's just make this 0.05. Okay, it doesn't need to be an extreme change, but sometimes the little things are those that matter. And I'm going to do this same thing on the right nostril, of course. But remember here, this was positive. So, okay. And final thing, I want the shape of the head to change slightly. When the mouth is going to open wide, I want the bottom part of the head to squish a little bit. It will add a little bit more to the effect, I think. So we add this openness property also to the head. And we're now going to finally use our radius. So the ellipse had, our rotation, this one here. So the ellipse method has also a component for the rotation here. And so far we have been specifying 0 everywhere. This is where we are now going to pass openness. And I'm going to refresh. And okay, some crazy things happening there. I noticed that in the main page, I am not clearing the canvas before drawing each image. So this context here, clear rect from 0, 0 to my canvas width, my canvas height. Okay. Let's put this on a new line so we can see the code better here. So that's one thing. And second is that I want to have a negative rotation here, so minus the openness. And this is just way, way too much. So we're gonna put this to 0.1 maybe to both of these. Yeah, this is good. And I want this mid sections here to also rotate a little bit. So I'm gonna change this to minus openness times 0.05 maybe. And this one same, but with plus. Okay. And we're done.
You're not done until I can speak as you promised.
Oh, right. Almost forgot. To make the pumpkin react to us speaking into the microphone, I'm gonna be using Frank's microphone class. You need to check his video to see how he got it to work. He also made some really cool waveform visualizations, so you definitely need to check it out. To use Frank's code, I just need to initialize the microphone class like this. And then I don't need this frame counter here or any of this fancy stuff. Instead, I'll use the volume coming from the microphone here directly, but I can only do this once the microphone is initialized. So I need to check it first. Now I refresh and testing. 1, 2.
Hey, something's not quite right.
Yeah, the mouth doesn't open very much. That's because it's unlikely we're gonna get close to 100% volume unless we shout really, really loud into the microphone, and needless to say, I'm not gonna be doing that. So I'll scale this up a bit. Testing. 1, 2.
Whoa-ho-ho!
Yeah, a bit too much. Testing. 1, 2.
Better.
Yeah, but it's still kinda too sensitive, I think. You can get a smoother animation by using a larger window size for the fast Fourier transform, like this. Testing. 1, 2.
Yeah, smooth as silk.
Alright, that's it for today. Hope you liked this video.
It was smooth sailing.
If you did like it, consider sharing it with those who might be interested.
Smooth operator.
And subscribe and press the bell button if you want to see more things like this in the future.
I will after I grab a smoothie. A pumpkin smoothie.